we talked about marginal gains. We've talked about attention to detail, things that are really important. And you've put the reps in. What happens when you're up here tonight and if you're engaging, really just present, you're in the moment, you're in that state with them, in that relationship? Were there times when no joke comes and you're just trying to find your way out of it, or are you just quite comfortable in that space right now because you put the work in?
You learn to be comfortable in the silence. For the most part, realistically, I say the same thing every night. So that's why the real focus is on listening and trying to get across the ideas. And remembering that thing we spoke about earlier of, they haven't heard it before.
Yes.
They don't know what's going to happen. Yes. It's exciting for them. Even the moments where I'm like very vulnerable and exposing. 90 shows ago, that felt very vulnerable and exposing authentically to say that to an audience. Now, it probably doesn't, but I try to just let it feel like that and give it the space and go, okay, these people haven't heard me say this before, so I am exposing myself to a new group of people, but it's just trying to focus on they haven't heard it before and it's for them.
I am just absolutely delighted that Vittorio Angelone is joining us for one of our in-person podcasts. Thanks for joining us. For folks who don't know you, Vittorio, I'm going to give you a minute to just introduce yourself. But from my perspective, we've known each other for quite a while through basketball and growing up in Belfast for our club and playing for our club, Queen's Basketball Club. But you, I guess what's fun for me is when I lived in London many, many years ago, I got to see you really kind of start and launch your career, which was such a treat. So would you consider yourself a stand-up comic?
Yeah.
And a podcast host? What other things would you use to describe yourself?
Yeah, I would say comedian, podcaster, writer. I audition for stuff sometimes to act, but yet to come through. But yeah, mostly the comedian thing. I'd say that's the core of what I do at the minute, stand-up comedy. No matter where I'm performing, I have to address my name. Because I'm called Vittorio Angelone. It's so silly for me to be called that. Look, I get, people always say it's cool. It's just because I'm half Italian. That's why I'm called Vittorio. People always think Vittorio is a cool name. I don't think Vittorio is a cool name. I don't think very many people think that their own name is cool. Because all your name is to you is the noise you've heard more than any other noise in the whole world. And no matter how cool anyone else thinks it is, all it makes you do is go like this. Huh? That's all your name does.
It's so funny because you're very casual about this right now. And your 3 points that we're going to get into is really creating a personal brand, which is like the complete opposite of being very intentional and thoughtful.
Yeah, I don't, it's hard. You just want to, I think there's some comedians, I think it's more allowed in America to be driven or ambitious or intentional as a comedian. And that be at the heart of what you do. But I think in the UK and Ireland, it's people view it as a bit weird or something. And I think I probably view it as a bit weird. You can only be so sincere. And I am sincere a lot in on stage, actually, in my shows. But I think kind of publicly on the internet and stuff, it's hard to allow yourself to just say what you mean without kind of undercutting it with a joke.
Yeah. It's been important for you, presumably, from the start of your career to create a personal brand. Tell me a little bit about why that's been important.
I think 20 years ago in comedy, it was all about TV, and there was this real style in the UK in particular of observational, of we all do this, relatable. When you go to the shops and then this happens and then your Peter Kay's, Michael McIntyre's, that kind of stuff. And I think maybe from social media and from just the way culture has changed, I think people want a lot more personality in their comedians. I think people want to walk away from the set knowing more about who that person is. You need to buy into the person rather than just oh, that was funny, he tells it how it is type thing. I think you need to really open up a little bit more and let the audience see you for who you are, and to the degree that that is authentic or not, that's kind of your prerogative. But I think having a personal brand is the only way for people to buy into you enough to buy tickets for the tour.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to make money, really. Money from TV is gone for stand-ups, essentially.
Right. Let's get moving into your first point, because we've really set the stage now for why it's important. And your first point around creating a personal brand, Vittorio, was start with social media. Let's talk about that.
Well, social media feels like the way to reach people without anyone else getting in your way. Like, I think a lot, like 20 years ago, you would take a show up to the Edinburgh Fringe or whatever it is, and you would try to impress some TV producer who would put you on their show, and then you'd be pumped into everyone's living rooms, and everybody watched Live at the Apollo, and that was very exciting, and you would tour off the back of that. Live at the Apollo still exists. Not very many people watch it anymore. People do. Like, it's not like nobody's watched. They wouldn't make it if nobody watched it. You get paid about a third of what you did 10 years ago for Live at the Apollo. So I just did start with social media, and I think it is for two reasons. Number one, because I grew up watching the Northern Irish comedy circuit, and I saw all these people, Shane, Todd, Colin Geddes, Aaron McCann, David, all these people, just like be ignored, because the Northern Irish comedy scene was ignored and kind of continues to be ignored by the BBC and mainstream TV stuff for such a long time. But I think that was, and I think this is probably a learning thing of like, you could take that in a really bad way and you could go, oh, well, I'm just being ignored, so what's the point? Whereas all those guys just kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm going to build what I need to make a career work for me in spite of everything else. And I think that thing of like responding to what could be a negative and going, okay, good. What's the benefit of the BBC ignoring me? The benefit is I can say whatever I want and I can make whatever I want, and I don't have to wait for them to fund it or whatever. I don't have to wait for them to sign off or change this or change that. So I saw that happening in Northern Ireland, and I think, because when you're just starting, you don't know what you're capable of. You're like, I don't know what I could achieve in this or what is going to happen. I could well have done all the TV stuff. I don't know. But like, that's a maybe, and that's in someone else's hands. So I was like, well, what's in my hands? Because I was just convinced and slightly scared and fearful that I was going to be completely ignored by all those guys, because that's what I see happen to other people. So I was like, look, if I build a social media following and they ignore me like I think they will, then that's good. I have my social media following. If I build a social media following and then they don't ignore me and I get all those opportunities, double good. Like, who cares? Like, it's not negative that I've done this other thing as well.
It's a win-win.
It's all additive.
Yeah.
So it just felt like, what's in my control? And I had this obsession around that time of like, just do what you can. Like, I was this kind of like stoicism thing of like, well, it doesn't matter what any of them are doing. It doesn't matter if no one else is giving you opportunities. Build what you can build and just reach out to the audience. And that's a hard thing to phrase, reach out to the audience. Don't pander to them. While I think that works, I think you can build a very big social media following by pandering to people online. I don't think that's long lasting or fun. I think,
or authentic, probably, if we go back to that.
And if it goes badly, like, I think on stage is like the biggest and harshest lessons that you get of like, look, I've had gigs where it goes badly and nobody laughs and it's terrible. But I'm just trying to do what I do. And if they don't like that, it feels horrible, but at least I'm like, I was doing what I do.
And I love the way you think about this, and we talked about it on the drive over here, and how it resonates with what I learned from our comedian and people playbook, Jared Christmas, and he said, don't become a product of your environment, bring your product to the environment. And I think that really aligns with the way you see social media. I'm so curious, Vittorio, because I've seen your social media following grow exponentially. You've obviously been quite, and we're going to talk about that, about thoughtful and intentional with your design around that. What are the things that you did that worked really well for you that you would think to share with others who are trying to build a personal brand online? What things have worked well in your social media approach?
Spend money. Not loads. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't do sponsored ads or anything like that really very often at all. Like, get equipment that you need to make the thing good, and spend time figuring out. I'm not saying you have to do this Mr. Beast thing of studying the algorithm for 6 months and then going and becoming the biggest YouTuber in the world. Whatever, like who cares? But look at what works, look at what you do, and figure out an intersection. I think some comedians and some people get bogged down in like, well, I don't do that, and that's what works online or whatever, and that's not my thing. Do what you do in a way that suits the thing, because that's all it is. Like, art is always confined by the medium. Like a painter has a canvas. It's only so big. It's A3. It's whatever size it is. That's where their art has to exist. And there's always a canvas. There's always been a canvas. There's always been confines that you can exist within. There's always a box that you're playing in. There's always kind of lines on the pitch. So just figure out how to do what you do within the confines. But I think the real basics of fit it to whatever the social media platform is. If that's the aspect ratio, if it's 9:16, if it's 4:3, if it's a square, just make it suit that. Whack some subtitles on it, figure out how to do it. And when I first started like subtitling videos, it took me, for a 60-second video, it took me 60 minutes to subtitle that video because I was doing it so wrong.
Yeah.
I was like doing
manually,
things, like every little bit and bob and blah, blah, blah. And then one day, a friend of mine was like, oh, have you tried this app? And it wasn't even that it did it automatically, because I find sometimes it like wrecks punchlines or whatever, but it just took 60 minutes to like 15 minutes. Yeah. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
And there's no, just like, I think trusting in like upskilling is very good. I think that's a broadly applicable thing where, like, I know, and even when I was at uni before I started stand-up, I was talking to my friends who were studying like to be a lighting technician in the theatre, or a sound tech, or a jazz musician, or an actor, or stage manager, any of these things. So I know I'm not an expert in any of those things, but I know how to talk to people who are experts in those things.
And you know enough to get your art out there. And you've been here early. You've been here all day, essentially, since...
Yeah, half 2, 3 o'clock.
Okay, right.
Just watching people do stuff.
And is that typical?
I like to get there early. I like to see what's going on. In a normal venue where it isn't in the round and all this kind of extra mad stuff, we get there an hour and a half before doors, and we're a very slick operation. And tour manager Connell does the lighting check, and we go through all the lighting states and go, this needs to look like this. I'm here particularly early for this one because it's just a bigger...
Yeah, let's take a walk up on the stage. Let's see what this looks and feels like up here. This is... how intimidating is this for you? Given that we were talking about earlier, obviously this is your hometown, so you know people here. Does this faze you, or are you like...
In the first time I did it, very nervous. And I'm very rarely nervous anymore for stand-up. Actually, and I never really was. I don't get massive performance anxiety. I get everything else anxiety, but I don't get performance anxiety really. But this, I think the combination of it being a big hometown show, knowing a lot of people I know were here, and the fact that it's in the round, which is just it just takes up a chunk of your brain, because you're having to do this whole, make sure they get some of the show, make sure they get some of the show.
Yeah. I'm going to move us into our second point in just a moment, but I do have one question that I'm personally curious about, which is, is there a moment, or one or two moments that you know that, wow, that's when the social media work that you put in really paid off in terms of your branding?
That when I went up to the Edinburgh Fringe for the first time and did my first show, it's a little room, maybe sat like 60 people. It was probably the lead up to that Fringe, actually. I was doing work in progresses in London, and like it was first time putting on solo shows and trying to like sell them or whatever. And there was just a couple moments of like, I did a work in progress show at my first ever one in Soho at a bar called The Spice of Life. It was like 70 tickets or whatever. I was like, oh, God knows. And then it sold out, and I was like, oh, that's kind of bad. And the numbers were like minimal then. It was great. It was like, I had maybe 9,000 followers on Instagram.
Okay.
Which at the time I was like, I remember when I hit 10K, I was like, this is amazing. Wow, whatever. And then like went up to that Fringe, and again, like 9,000-10,000 followers, and you just go like, God, that's not loads. But then the shows just started to say, like, before I arrived at the Fringe, all the weekends were sold out, and I was like, this is kind of mad. And then like in the build up to the Fringe, I went to Angel Comedy Club, which is like one of my favorite comedy clubs that I went to before I'd started stand up. And I sold that room out and I was like, oh my, like what is going on here? And then I went up to the Fringe, the whole run gradually sells out. We had these bigger rooms. And it's just like, oh my God, like this is.
And what do you put that down to though? Is that just plying away, people telling you? Because one of the I think contradictions in growing a personal brand and growing a brand, I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's about quantity versus quality. And what I mean by that is it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? Like, you know, Ulster Hall, it's going to be pretty full tonight, right? Like with 9,000 followers, maybe not, you know, but possibly if you have the right audience engaged, the right people there that really love your stuff and they travel. Like I think about gigs that I traveled to. We talked about Foy and you're doing some work with him in one of his shows. Like I'd go and see Foy anywhere, you know, I'd make an effort to go. I'm pretty committed. Whereas there are other artists I follow on Instagram, but I'm just, you know, I'm not really paying attention. What's your thinking around that?
So I think there's this concept that people talk about of like going viral. And if you have like a viral video, then, oh, great, you can like sell shows or whatever. I don't think anyone who comes to see me, like very rarely, I know actually that there are some people that this happens to, where they see one video of me and they book a ticket off one video. I think that very, very rarely happens. And I can basically point you towards the videos that has happened for. I don't necessarily know why those are the videos that happens for, but I remember someone phrased it as, for going viral to be effective, it can't be like pulling a party popper. It has to be like blowing up a balloon until it explodes. Every video that you post in your feed in the lead up to the video that went viral is a breath into the balloon, a breath into the balloon, a breath into the balloon. And then when it pops and that one video gets 100,000 views or whatever at the time, that was the first time I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. If you have nothing else on that Instagram profile for them to go watch,
it's a waste almost.
It's a waste of all these people going like, who's this guy? What's going on? Whereas if you go viral, and now, like if I have a video that pops off, you can scroll through videos of me being funny for like half a day.
Yeah.
And you won't get to the bottom of my Instagram feed.
Yeah.
And I think it's that thing of once they see that one viral video and then if they watch videos of you for like an hour and a half, they just get into a black hole of you. You have to create a black hole of you. And
now they're looking at tour shows.
And then they're a fan.
Yeah.
Because they're like, wow, he's entertained me for an evening.
Yeah.
I think what people do wrong, you have to earn people's time. Big advocate of that. Where I know some comedians who've never posted a clip of them doing stand-up on the internet, and then they put out a film of their hour-long show. And I go, who on earth do you think is giving you an hour of their time having seen nothing else of what you do? That is insanity. That's complete insanity.
I love that you've just described this. This is really this has been a nugget for me, because I think in the work that we're doing, I'm always thinking, I wish more companies would see the value that we bring and bring us in. And we do a lot of work with our podcast producer, Esther, who's sitting over here, and Daniel. And we're so leaning into video because I want them to see, feel, almost experience it and go, okay, I could see how that would land, you know? So
it's singles from the album.
Yes.
That's what it is.
And if you want the album, you come to the tour.
And it's like, and then you get the album. Like, it's just like, it's a big funnel of like, here's a little bit. Like when I started posting videos, I was consciously like 30 seconds. Because you'll chance 30 seconds on somebody. You'll go, yeah, I'll watch this, never seen it before. And you go, oh, that was funny. And then next time it's another 30 seconds. Oh, that was funny the last time. I'll watch this 30 seconds again. And then 10 times later, I post a 45-second long video. And this is, God, like embarrassing for the attention spans of the world right now. But listen, it's the canvas I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
You go a 45-second, they go, oh yeah, I'll give this one a chance. Then you do a minute and a half and they're like, oh yeah, those last 12 videos were funny. Yeah. I'm going to watch this minute and a half long video. And then it gradually gets longer and longer and longer. And then you go, here's a whole show. I think a big reason I like going to football matches at the stadium is when you go to a football match, you know what your identity is. You're all wearing the same shirt. You've got a team. You've got a group that you're proud that you're a part of. I think lots of people do that now. They find the group that they happen to be a part of. They're very proud to be part of that group, and that group becomes their identity. But outside of football, I don't really have that luxury. None of the groups that I happen to be a part of are things you're allowed to be proud of. I'm what's called a straight white man. Boo! You can't be proud of being a straight white man. Look, I'd love to say otherwise. I'd love to be up here being like, you actually can be proud of being a straight white man. But number one, that's a rally. And number two, I just don't think it holds up to very much interrogation. You know, I think realistically, if somebody came up to me and they were like, I'm a proud lesbian woman, I'd be like, nice one. Good luck on your journey. Have a great day. But if somebody came up to me and they were like, I'm a proud straight white man, I'd be like, check his hard drive. Something's going on. And people go, oh yeah.
I'd love to.
But you have to earn people's trust and earn people's time. So it's this thing of like building up all these gradual things of like, so that they trust that when they see you for an hour. And I heard someone put it really well, Andrew Schultz, who's a very good comedian, very kind of inspirational comedian in lots of ways. And he looked at his like YouTube analytics like years and years ago. And he was like, nobody, because he would talk to people who had Netflix specials, and Netflix would say to them, pretty much the average viewing time of an hour-long Netflix special, a stand-up special, is 20 minutes.
Right.
People stop watching after 20 minutes. And it's like, okay, why is that? And then Andrew Schultz looked at his YouTube and went, people watch my videos, which are between 1 and 5 minutes. They are on my videos for 2 hours. And he says it's like the snooze button on your alarm. On a Sunday morning, you wake up, alarm goes off, 8 in the morning, whatever. You're never going to turn off the alarm and set another one for 2 hours later. Mm-hmm. What you will do is hit snooze, hit snooze, hit snooze, hit snooze, hit snooze for 2 hours. And that's what it is on YouTube, of like you watch one video and then there's 2 little things and you go, oh yeah, I'll watch that one. Oh yeah, because you're always being given a choice of like, what's next? You just feel a bit more in control. You're not just sat there going like, oh, is this for an hour? Yeah.
So lots of social media focus, lots of strategy and intention, good insights around. I have to say, I'll say it again. I love this idea of earning people's time and trust. I want to move into your second point, which is around, we've titled it marginal gains, and we're going to dig into it. But the bit for me that I witnessed with you in your career early on was the fact that you were just out there, just gigging and gigging. Goodness sake, watching you on social media, you were basically half the night on the tube, moving from club to club. And I just admired it. And I share with you that I watched the Ed Sheeran docu on Disney Plus, and I watched it, and he talked about how his friends were gigging, 3 times a week, and he was gigging 3 times a night. And when I watched it, I was like, that's Vittorio to me. So talk to us a little bit more about, moving away from social media, the virtual canvas. Talk about the in-person canvas and the marginal gains behind that.
When you start doing comedy, particularly in London, you get 5 minutes. That's what you're afforded. You get 5 minutes, and it's often what's called a bringer, which is where you have to bring an audience member to be allowed to perform on the show.
Right.
And it's funny, people really kind of like, some comedians get really like their hackles up about bringers, and they're, it's not fair, the promoter should bring the audience and blah, blah, blah. Whatever. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you reach what you want to reach in comedy, every gig's a bringer, and you have to bring everyone.
Yeah.
Like to do the Ulster Hall tonight, I have to bring 1,000 people. That's how that works. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's the same concept. just different scale. Yeah.
So you had to do that. And I thought, God, I knew people who were gigging 7 nights a week, and in total they're getting 35 minutes of stage time. And I was like, fuck, that's tough, and you have to find a different person to bring along, and you've only got so many mates in London, and you're just like, yeah, oh my God, like this seems very daunting. And then what ends up happening is comedians like are the bringers for each other. So it's like you end up
Very
going to
good.
watch so that they'll come to watch yours, and then you're down to like maybe 5 nights a week, and then you're kind of, well, you got to do other stuff. You do 4 nights, and it's just, it gets cut down. So I'd say lots of people are getting 20 to 25 minutes if they're doing 4 or 5 nights a week. And they're probably out 7 nights a week, like doing other people's shows and stuff. And I was like, again, how do I maximize this? So I was like, I'm just going to put on my own show. I'm going to host it. I do 10 minutes at the start. I do a little bit anytime someone has like a bad set. I'll do like a couple minutes in there, a couple minutes in there. I'll do 5 or 10 minutes to start a second half, a couple minutes in there, comes in. So over the course of the evening of like hosting, I'm on stage for 20 to 25 minutes in one night, which is what lots of people are getting over the course of the week. I'm getting 45, 50 minutes of stage time just by doing admin. Basically by dealing with the faff of putting on your own night and going to a venue and saying, can we do this? How many chairs? Blah, blah, blah. Can like get budget for this? And, you know, doing like a Google form where everybody applies and you watch everybody's terrible open mic night videos and you go, okay, we'll book them. It's a nightmare. It's a faff. People drop out, this, that, and the other. But I was like, I just want to be on stage and I want to do it. And I don't want to be out 7 nights a week. I really don't want to do that.
The bit that I admire that I take from this, and certainly in my career when I started the business, was just do the work, just get out there, do the job. And I in my first year in 2020, all the work I was doing in terms of facilitation, teaching was online, and I just said yes to everything, and I got paid very little, as I know early comedians are experiencing exactly. So you're out there doing,
it's costing you money to get there,
but you're doing the work and you're putting the time in. And I think, you know, that for me was really important, because oftentimes, again, in the kind of space that I'm in, people want to jump to the Ulster Hall. They want to go from 0 to 1,000, and I think you haven't done the work on your craft, and how can you? And it's not fun. It's not going to be great. It's not a winning strategy, I think, overall. We're going to move into our last point, so we can get you ready for your show tonight. Your third point around creating a personal brand is around your attention to detail. So talk to us about that, because it is somewhat possibly in tension or contrast to maybe how you perform or show up. Or
if I could be in control of every moment of the audience's experience from when they walk into the venue to when they walk out, I would be. I think every single bit of it adds up to their experience in the show. I think all of it's so important. I think the drinks that are on offer, I think the receptacle you're giving your drink in, I think the music that's playing in the foyer. I ask every venue, can you play my pre-show music, not just in the theatre? Can you pump it into the foyer as well? Because when you arrive, show, my space, I've created a thing that you're entering into. It's a theme park of what I want it to be. And I'm very specific about the lighting states before the show. I'm very specific about the lighting states during the show. Like every little thing that I can do to make it better, I really try and do it. Somebody put it really well to me. It was an actor friend of mine. They said, it's important to be a pleasure to work with. It's not important to be easy to work with. Every interaction should be like pleasurable, nice. You should be polite, considerate, conscientious in the way you ask for things, but you don't have to make everybody else's life easy. Ulster Hall is a fantastic example, actually, and you'll see when in the kind of later stuff from the show, I'm doing it in a very annoying way for the venue. I'm plonking a stage in the middle of the room and having seats on all sides. It's
not often you get access behind the scenes at such an iconic venue. We're at the Ulster Hall in Belfast, and I've got to spend the last couple of hours with Vittorio Angelone. I've known him since he was a young kid, but his career in stand-up comedy is just taking off. He's allowed us to sit with him, talk with him, and walk around as he builds the set and the venue for tonight's show. It's going to be absolutely incredible to see how he prepares, how he develops, and how he puts on this incredible experience for all those lucky enough to catch him tonight.
Excuse me, fellas. Sorry, lads. No, don't worry. Sorry for doing a stupid seating arrangement.
You're not sorry at all, though.
No.
So talk us through this.
So,
Tell us about the vision for this catastrophe.
normally, people do the shows from over there on what's known as the stage, but I thought that was a bit boring. And I just wanted to give all the ushers more faff. So I plugged this. I know they have done boxing here, so I just said, can we do that? Can we just put a stage in the middle of the room and surely the layout will make sense? And initially they said no.
Right.
And then I asked the big dogs at Shine if they could ask the question for me.
Right.
They said, yes, we can make that happen, and convinced the Ulster Hall to get on board with it. And then hired in all these lights, extra speakers, these lights over here.
All right,
all that
so
stuff
it's
to
not, it
point
doesn't
here.
come. It doesn't come like this. You've got to be quite prescriptive
Yeah,
to say this is what I'm going for.
Yeah. And whereas Shine are very good at just being like, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
It might cost you a lot of money. And this has got like, you do the Ulster Hall normally and like I'd make a lot more money.
If you didn't do this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of this costs so much money.
No, I know.
But I think it's just endlessly worth it.
Yeah. Because
wow.
the question is, what happens if you don't do this? Is
It's
it still a success?
just the same as everybody else.
Right. Okay.
And it'd be fine.
Yeah.
Some people would like it. But it's just like swing for a home run.
Yeah.
There's a male mental health crisis as well. People talk about that. The male mental health crisis. I think that kind of identity thing is part of what causes it. I think a lot of straight men now, we don't know what our place is in a progressive society, and we don't know what parts of ourselves we're allowed to be proud of. I think that can drive young men to kind of weird places on the internet. Straight men, we get a lot of advice from a lot of different places in quite aggressive tones. Straight men need to do better. Straight men, you need to check in on how your friends are feeling, and you need to check in on how you're feeling. And if there's any straight men in the room who've ever been told to check in on how you're feeling, I would honestly say, don't. It's not for us. I think telling a straight man to check in on how he's feeling should be illegal. Look, I think we should tell young hetero boys to check in on how they're feeling because they've got time. It's too late for me. The first time someone told me to check in on how I was feeling, I was 25 years old. I mean, you've never checked in on how you're feeling for 25 years. Then you check in for the first time. It's not good. Someone's like, you need to check in. Okay. Ah! I was so much happier before I found out how sad I am.
They must love you for that.
They hate it so much. All the ushers are like, I don't know where anyone's seat allocation is, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, that is not my problem because I think this makes it better. And my cousin / tour manager, I was so glad this moment happened. He told me about it because he was stood at the side of the stage at kind of the tech booth, just by one of the doors where people come in. And he saw someone walk in the door and go, wow.
Very
and I'm
good.
like, worth it.
That's it. That's
Worth
the
my
moment.
whole day and multiple Zoom calls figuring out how to do the lighting and the sound for this. Worth it. Worth endless faff for whoever it is.
That's it. That's the attention to
Just,
detail.
wow.
The last question I have on this point, because you didn't always have the clout, the opportunity to probably shape things the way you want. And I know that. And I think anyone that's earlier stage in their career, their craft, their art, whatever, I don't care if you're in, you're working for a company versus running your own, versus you're a performer. It doesn't really matter. You don't always have that same level of control. And so I'm curious about maybe early on, how did you exert influence around attention to details that you knew were important, but maybe it wasn't your comedy show. Maybe you were showing up. You didn't have time to brief, the AV guys. Like what sort of things did you do that were useful?
Even running those open mics, I was like, okay, what are all the lights you have in this room for this venue? Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, okay. And I was like, okay, I'm going to just buy a spotlight. And at the time, it's like £100. It's a lot of money at that point in my whatever. But I was like, I'll make it better. And it'll pay for itself in 2 months' time. Like, just make it better. Just make it work. And I'm like, and how I did it when I didn't have any clout or any people working around, and it was like bad venues. It's me sprinting around the room, like doing dimmer switches and hitting this button and going up the bar, going, kill the house lights, do this, that, and the other. My playlist on the Spotify, working out solutions on how to do this, that, and the other. And it's just like, I just think all of it's so important. And I constantly just drive myself mad doing tiny little things that add up to a better thing.
Well, this is a good jumping off point to wrap things up, Vittorio. It's been a pleasure. So we've talked about creating a personal brand from the unique lens of a stand-up comedian who's had a great career so far and continues to grow. And we're excited to see you continue.
Come crashing down.
Preferably not after this, not as a result of this podcast. But you talked about 3 things, right? You talked about starting with social media. You've explained some thinking around how you have to earn people's time and trust. I love that piece. Secondly, we talked about marginal gains, which is all around getting your reps in and how you curated a lifestyle that worked for you, that allowed you to be on stage more than your peers in order to hone your craft. And then thirdly, we just really focus a lot on attention to detail. And I could see your energy get up and how critical it is to you and how important it is. And then to see the benefits when someone goes, wow. And that says something about you and the experience that you're creating through your show. If everyone listening or watching was to take on board these points and apply it to their own respective field, how might the world change?
People worry about what their potential is and what the ceiling on their capabilities are. It's like the only way to find out is to just start like sprinting towards it. And then you'll stop when you stop. You'll run out of steam when you run out of steam. But just do maximum. Make everything as good as it can be. Do as much as you can. Within your, I think that's like that first bit like couches the other two in that thing of like, don't pander. Make what you want to make, do what you want to do, believe in what you're doing, and then work really hard and be meticulous with everything else. And I think that would those 3 things would, I think a lot of people would probably be a lot more satisfied in their work. Probably.
I think definitely, by the way.
Okay, good.
Vittorio Angelone, it's such a pleasure to have you. This has been fantastic. Thanks for making the time for your show tonight.
Thank you very much for having me on.